It was a calm Saturday morning when Evelyn Mason pulled on her cardigan and picked up her grocery list from the kitchen counter. The house was quiet, too quiet, now that her husband had been gone for 3 years. Routine had become her anchor, and Saturday trips to the market were her small way of keeping order in a world that felt a little emptier with each passing season. Just as she was slipping her shoes on, the sound of a car engine outside caught her attention. Peering through the window, she saw a familiar black sedan pull into her driveway. It was Daniel, her son-in-law. Evelyn's brows lifted in surprise. Daniel rarely came by without Lily, her daughter, and certainly not this early in the morning. She opened the front door, smiling politely. "Daniel, everything all right?" He stepped out of the car, tall and slightly disheveled, holding his keys loosely in one hand. "Hey, Mom, Evelyn," he corrected himself awkwardly. "I was heading out toward town and thought I could give you a ride to the store." "Save you the bus trip?" Evelyn hesitated. It wasn't that she didn't like Daniel, she did. He was kind, hard-working, and had always treated Lily with love. But he also had a tendency to keep to himself, and his offers of help were rare. Still, she didn't want to seem ungrateful. "Well," she said, tucking the grocery list into her purse, "that's very thoughtful of you. Let me grab my coat." A few minutes later, they were on the road, the hum of the tires filling the silence. The suburban houses faded behind them, replaced by stretches of autumn-colored trees. Evelyn glanced sideways at Daniel. He was focused on the road, jaw set tight, his fingers drumming softly on the steering wheel. "How's work been?" she asked, trying to fill the quiet. He gave a short chuckle. "Busy as always. Too many meetings, not enough coffee." She smiled, relieved to hear some humor. "And Lily? She said she was redecorating the guest room?" "Yeah, she's been on a roll lately." "You know her. Once she gets an idea in her head, it's full steam ahead." He smiled faintly, but it didn't reach his eyes. Evelyn noticed. She had always been good at reading people. Years of motherhood and marriage had trained her well. Something was off about Daniel. His laughter felt forced, his tone distracted. Every few moments he opened his mouth as if to say something, then stopped. She watched the road roll out before them, her fingers gripping her purse. "You seem quiet today," she said gently. "Everything okay?" Daniel hesitated, his gaze flicking toward her before returning to the road. "Yeah, just been thinking a lot about family lately," he said, almost to himself. Evelyn tilted her head, studying him. The words hung in the air, heavy and uncertain. Something about his tone made her heart tighten, a subtle warning that this would not be an ordinary drive to the store. Something deeper was waiting just down the road, and whatever Daniel had to say would change the rhythm of her quiet life forever. The hum of the car engine filled the space between them like an invisible wall. Outside, the morning sun filtered through the trees, painting golden streaks on the windshield. Yet inside the car, the air felt heavy, thick with words unspoken. Evelyn sat with her hands folded neatly in her lap, trying to ignore the tension that had begun to creep into the quiet. She'd always found Daniel a pleasant man, reserved, respectful, perhaps even a little shy. But this silence felt different. It wasn't the comfortable kind shared between family members who knew each other well. It was strained, uncertain, and brittle. Every few minutes, Daniel cleared his throat or shifted in his seat, as if debating whether to speak. "So," Evelyn began, forcing a gentle smile, "Lily told me you two were thinking of taking a trip to the coast next month. Did you decide on a date?" Daniel's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Not yet," he said, his tone clipped. "Work's been unpredictable lately." Evelyn nodded slowly. "You both deserve a little break. Lily's been working herself too hard lately, I think." He didn't respond right away. His eyes stayed fixed on the road, jaw clenched. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter, almost distant. "Yeah, she always pushes herself. Guess that's something she got from you." The compliment, though kind, sounded more like a reflex than genuine affection. Evelyn frowned slightly, sensing the unease beneath it. "Daniel," she said softly, "is everything all right between you and Lily?" He exhaled sharply, not in anger, but in the kind of exhaustion that comes from holding too much inside. "Yeah, we're fine," he said quickly. "It's not about that." "Not about that." The words stuck with her, echoing in her mind as she glanced out the window. The world outside looked calm. Couples walking dogs, kids on bicycles, a mailman waving from his truck. But inside that car, something fragile was shifting. Evelyn knew this feeling. She had lived through it before, the subtle tremor before bad news, the quiet tone people used when they were about to say something that would change everything. Memories surfaced unbidden. Long drives with her late husband, the silence before he confessed that his health was failing, the way his hands used to tighten on the wheel just like Daniel's now. Her chest ached at the parallel. She turned back to him, her voice gentle but firm. "You can talk to me, you know. Whatever it is, you don't have to keep it bottled up." Daniel's eyes flicked to her, then away again. "It's complicated," he murmured. "I don't even know where to start." Evelyn nodded, her instincts telling her that patience would do more good than pressure. So she stayed quiet, letting the hum of the tires fill the void once more. As the car rolled down the winding road, Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that this trip to the store had a purpose far beyond groceries. Daniel hadn't just come to offer her a ride. He was carrying something inside him, something heavy and unfinished. And before they reached town, she knew that burden was going to spill into the open. The drive had grown longer than usual. The grocery store was only 15 minutes from Evelyn's house, yet Daniel had taken a different route, a quieter, more scenic one that wound past the edge of town. Evelyn noticed but said nothing. The silence between them had thickened to the point where even the radio seemed too loud. Then, without warning, Daniel slowed the car and pulled over onto a small dirt road that led toward a lake Evelyn hadn't visited in years. The engine idled softly, the water glimmering in the distance like a sheet of silver glass. Evelyn looked at him confused. "Daniel?" she asked. "Why are we stopping here?" He gripped the steering wheel for a long moment, his knuckles turning white. Finally, he let out a slow breath and said, "Because I can't keep driving around pretending everything's fine. There's something I need to tell you." Evelyn's heart gave a quiet thump. His tone wasn't angry or defensive. It was weary, almost haunted. She straightened in her seat, bracing herself. He turned to face her then, his eyes clouded with guilt. "I should have told you this months ago, but I didn't know how. I didn't want to hurt you, or Lily." Evelyn's voice was calm but firm. "Whatever it is, Daniel, just say it." He swallowed hard, then spoke in a rush, as if the words had been waiting behind a dam too long. "When I helped you clean the attic last spring, I found something. A box I thought was just old papers, but inside was your husband's journal. I shouldn't have opened it. I know that. But He paused, his voice cracking. "I read it, Evelyn." For a heartbeat, she said nothing. The wind outside rustled through the trees. "You read John's journal?" she repeated softly. Daniel nodded, shame flooding his face. "I didn't mean to invade your privacy. But once I saw what was inside, I couldn't stop." It wasn't just his work notes. There were letters in there, handwritten ones, to someone else. Her breath caught. The words "someone else" hit her like a cold slap. "Someone else," she echoed. He nodded. "He wrote them like love letters, Evelyn. Apologies, confessions, regrets. I didn't understand all of it, but it seemed like he had a relationship with another woman." For a long moment, Evelyn couldn't breathe. The world seemed to shrink to the sound of the lake lapping against the shore and her pulse pounding in her ears. John, her husband, the man who had held her hand through sickness, who whispered promises of forever even in his last days? Her voice trembled. "Why are you telling me this now?" Daniel's eyes glistened. "Because I saw how much you still talk about him, how much you worship his memory. And every time you do, I feel sick, because I know something you don't. I couldn't keep watching you live in a lie." Evelyn turned away, staring at the lake. The sunlight shimmered through her tears. For years, she had thought the hardest truths were buried with her husband, but now, sitting beside the man her daughter loved, she realized the past was about to rise from the dead, one page at a time. For a long moment after Daniel's confession, there was only silence, the kind that presses down on a person until it's almost unbearable. The lake outside shimmered with light, but inside the car, It felt like the air had turned cold. Evelyn stared straight ahead, her knuckles pale as she clutched her purse on her lap. Her husband's name, John, echoed in her mind, tangled with Daniel's words. Love letters, regrets, another woman. Each thought struck like a hammer. She tried to steady her breathing, but emotion rose like a storm she couldn't contain. Finally, she turned toward Daniel, her voice trembling but sharp. "You had no right to read his journal," she said. "No right to drag me into this." "I know," Daniel said quickly. His voice was thick with remorse. "You're right. I shouldn't have opened it. I don't have an excuse, just, I don't know. Curiosity? Stupidity? But once I read the first few pages, I couldn't stop. I thought I was helping." Evelyn let out a bitter laugh. "Helping? You think telling me that my husband, the man I buried, might have been unfaithful helps me?" Daniel didn't look at her. His hands rested motionless on his knees. "I didn't want to hurt you. I just couldn't keep lying by omission. Every time you told stories about him, how perfect he was, He hesitated, then added softly, "I saw my own reflection in that. I saw how easy it is to hide behind silence." Evelyn blinked, startled by his tone. Beneath his words, there was something else, something deeply personal. "Daniel," she said slowly, "this isn't just about John, is it?" He looked at her then, his expression raw. "No," he admitted. "It's not. I've been struggling, Evelyn. I love Lily more than anything, but I keep feeling like I'm not enough, like she deserves better. I found those letters, and I saw how secrets can rot a family from the inside out. I didn't want to be that kind of man." Evelyn's anger softened, but the pain still burned in her chest. She turned toward the window, her reflection fractured against the glass. Memories flooded her. The day John proposed, his laughter, his final words in the hospital. The man she knew had flaws, yes, but he had loved her. Or at least, she thought he had. Her voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper. "You should have come to me sooner, before it became this." Daniel nodded, his shoulders slumping. "I was afraid of breaking what little peace you had left." Evelyn sighed, her heart aching. "You did," she said quietly. "But maybe peace built on lies isn't real peace anyway." The words hung between them, heavy, but true. The storm that had been brewing inside her began to shift, its rage giving way to sorrow, and under that sorrow, a fragile thread of understanding. As the car sat by the lake, neither spoke again for several minutes. Outside, the wind picked up, rippling the water. Inside, Evelyn's world was changing, fracturing, yes, but also clearing. For the first time in years, she realized she might finally learn who her husband truly was, and who she herself had become in his absence. The tension in the car lingered, like a storm that hadn't yet passed. Evelyn sat quietly, her mind spinning in painful loops. She could still hear Daniel's words, letters to another woman. They echoed like whispers from a grave she thought had long been silent. Her heart throbbed between disbelief and betrayal. Finally, she drew a deep, shaky breath. "Show me," she said. Daniel blinked. "What?" "The journal," she repeated. "If you still have it, show me." He hesitated, then reached into the back seat, pulling out a worn, leather-bound book. Evelyn recognized it instantly. Her fingers brushed over the cover. Her husband's handwriting etched faintly on the edge. A lump formed in her throat. She opened the book slowly, the scent of aged paper and dust filling the car. The first. Few pages were familiar. Notes about the farm, sketches of repair plans, daily expenses. But then, halfway through, the handwriting changed. Softer, more personal. She saw the first line of one of the letters and froze. "Dearest Anna, I've thought of writing you for years, but I never had the courage." Her breath hitched. Anna. That name pierced through her memory like a flash of lightning. Anna wasn't another woman, Evelyn whispered. She was his sister. Daniel looked confused. His sister? Yes. Evelyn's voice trembled as she continued reading. They hadn't spoken since they were in their 20s. There was a terrible fight after their parents' death. She left town, and he always blamed himself for what happened. He told me once, just once, that he wished he'd apologized before it was too late. I thought he'd let it go, but... Her eyes glistened as she turned the pages. Each letter was filled with regret, sorrow, and longing, not for love, but for forgiveness. John had written to his estranged sister year after year, hoping to mend what pride had broken. He just never mailed the letters. Daniel's shoulders dropped as the truth dawned on him. "Oh, God, I thought—" Evelyn closed the book gently, her hands trembling. "You thought he was having an affair." He nodded, shame flooding his face. "I'm so sorry, Evelyn. I didn't know. I saw the words 'my dearest' and 'forgive me,' and I jumped to the worst conclusion." She looked at him, her anger melting into quiet sadness. "We all see what we fear most, Daniel. You were afraid of deceit." "I was afraid of the truth." For a moment, neither spoke. The weight of misunderstanding hung in the air, but so did something softer, understanding. Evelyn sighed, gazing out at the lake. "John carried his guilt to his grave. But now I know what it was. Maybe this is his way of asking me to forgive him, too." Daniel's voice was low. "And me?" She turned to him, a faint smile breaking through her tears. "You already are. You made a mistake, but you told the truth. That takes courage." As the car sat by the shimmering water, the heaviness began to lift. The journal that once symbolized betrayal had revealed something deeper, a buried act of love and a second chance at peace. For the first time that morning, Evelyn's heart felt light enough to breathe again. The road back home felt different. The same trees that had earlier passed by in tense silence now seemed softer, their branches swaying gently in the afternoon breeze. The car hummed steadily along the asphalt, and though neither Evelyn nor Daniel spoke for a few minutes, the quiet this time wasn't heavy, it was healing. Evelyn sat with John's old journal resting on her lap. Her fingertips traced the worn leather cover, and a small, wistful smile tugged at her lips. What had begun as a drive to the grocery store had turned into an unexpected journey through time, a confrontation with ghosts, guilt, and misunderstandings. Yet somehow she felt lighter than she had in years. Daniel finally broke the silence. "I really am sorry, Evelyn," he said softly. "If I'd just asked you before jumping to conclusions, I could have spared you all that pain." She glanced at him, her expression calm. "Maybe I needed to know," she said. "I spent years remembering John as a man who never made mistakes. But the truth is, he did. We all do. Knowing he carried regret makes him feel human again. Real." Daniel nodded slowly. "He sounds like someone who tried even if he failed sometimes." Evelyn smiled faintly. He was. And in his own way, he was still trying to make things right, even from afar. She paused, then added softly, "You remind me of him, you know. Not because of the mistakes, but because you care enough to face them." Daniel's grip on the steering wheel tightened, emotion flickering across his face. "You don't know what that means to hear," he said quietly. "I've always worried you didn't think I was good enough for Lily." Evelyn turned to him fully this time, her eyes warm. "I never thought that. But I did think you were distant. I see now, you're just cautious. You feel deeply, but you don't show it unless it matters." He exhaled, almost in relief, and for the first time since picking her up that morning, he smiled, genuinely. You know, Lily always says you're the strongest person she's ever met. I think she got that right. Evelyn chuckled softly. Strong or just stubborn? It's a fine line. They shared a laugh, and the sound filled the car like sunlight breaking through clouds. The tension that had once felt unbearable was gone, replaced by something rare and fragile, mutual respect. As they turned onto her street, the familiar sight of her small house came into view. The garden needed trimming, and the paint on the porch was fading, but to Evelyn it looked more like home than ever. When Daniel parked, she closed the journal gently and said, "You didn't just give me a ride today, Daniel. You gave me peace." He looked at her, humbled. "And you gave me perspective." They stepped out of the car, the crisp air brushing against their faces. For a moment, Evelyn looked up at the sky, bright, open, forgiving. Then she and Daniel walked side by side toward the house, their shadows stretching long across the driveway. It had begun as a simple errand, but it ended as something much deeper. A bridge between generations built on truth, courage, and the quiet redemption that sometimes comes from the most unexpected conversations.